executive wants sympathy, they check into one of the other rehab facilities. If they want secrecy to the grave and beyond, they choose Birchwoods. It's pricey as hell, but for folks who value their privacy, Birchwoods is worth every penny. And there was no way Vicky's parents would leak she was there. It would be too damaging to their lily-white reputations. Hell, they're so worried about their image that they hire a double to impersonate her for the press. So how had Jones known? I turned toward him, my expression studiously blank. "Are you in this for the duration?" He shrugged. "I owe Kevin Landingham a significant favor. Helping you will repay that." "Fair enough." I turned, giving Emma a long, hard look. What I was about to do was virtually guaranteed to annoy her, but it was necessary. If she came along, she'd get in the way. Besides, I didn't want to wait for Kevin, but I wanted him riding shotgun as soon as possible. Call me paranoid, but I didn't trust Jones with my back. I just didn't know him well enough. "When your brother gets back." "I'm going with you," she interrupted, but I kept talking over her. "Tell him where we're headed so that he can catch up." "We can leave him a note. I'm going with you. I am not sitting here and waiting like a good little girl." She wasn't shouting, wasn't hysterical. In fact, there was a level of cold, hard determination I'd never seen in her before. It made no sense. Why now of all times, and about this? I'm not." "You're not what?" We turned in unison at the sound of Kevin's voice. He stood outlined in the doorway, looking better than any man had a right to. My heart sped up at the sight of him. At the moment, his sandy blonde hair was just a little long, so that it fell in front of eyes the color of a perfect summer sky. His t-shirt and jeans were faded and worn, and just tight enough to show off a body to die for. I never managed to look at him without my body reacting. It's not just his looks, either. He's the whole package, brains, body, and a sense of humor. His strong jaw is softened by the deepest dimples. He has a smile that could make the clothes melt right off my body. I've wanted him from the minute I first laid eyes on him. I wouldn't have done anything about it when I was with Bruno, but that's been over for a long time now. But Kevin's with Amy. I don't know if she's a werewolf or not, but it doesn't matter. I have ethics. Besides, that woman is scary. "What are you doing up?" The words were directed at me. The look, however, was for Jones first, then Emma. "I did it," Jones said. He gave Kevin a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's necessary. We have to find her sire. Doing so in daylight when he's helpless would be preferable, don't you think?" "Not if it kills Celia in the process," Kevin snarled. The smile grew, and Jones's eyes started to twinkle. "Well, you're in luck. She's not dead." I let out a very unladylike snort of laughter. I couldn't help it. I'm a sucker for sarcasm. Besides, he was right. All three of them turned to glare at me. I not only didn't wither, I didn't even flinch. Bully for me. I held up a placating hand. "There's no point in arguing. I'm up. No harm done. And I've got work to do." Kevin's expression grew stubborn. He crossed his arms over his chest, his stance balanced and solid. "Tell me what you remember." Shit, he would ask that. "Not a damned thing." "The 14th, he said with significance. Should that mean something? I already knew I'd lost a full day. Well, crap. Yesterday had been Vicky's birthday. I'd gotten ready to go, but had I even visited her? I didn't remember it. She'd be upset that I was injured, but she'd be hurt if I forgot her birthday. And I wanted her to have her gift. I mean, that present had taken months to find and get the spells worked. But she wouldn't know that if I hadn't made it out there to give it to her. Kevin stared at me for a long moment, as though he were reading my mind. "You think you're fit to go out hunting your sire when you can't even remember a birthday?" He didn't bother to hide his derision, which raised my hackles. "I think I'm not going to have much choice, Kevin. Jones just told me I'm going to feel compelled to find him pretty soon. I'm not just going to sit around waiting for him to hunt me, and would rather go looking before I turn into a drooling idiot. You don't go after a master vamp after dark, and if I don't find and kill him first, he's going to be stalking me just as soon as the sun goes down, unless your friend Jones over there was lying." "He's not," Kevin admitted grudgingly. "But you don't have to be the one to hunt him." "Did you have any luck tracking him back from where you found Celia?" Jones's tone was deceptively bland. Kevin answered Jones's question with one of his own. "It's broad daylight. Celia, do you even know if you can go outside?" Kevin's voice had softened just a hair, as if he sensed the distress I wasn't willing to show. Maybe he could smell it? I didn't know enough about werewolves to know one way or the other. I'd passed up on that class in favor of 2 semesters of history of magic. I flinched involuntarily, just a little. I needed to keep my head in the game, but I really was having a hard time focusing. Shit. Only one way to find out. I gave him my perkiest insincere smile, and was rewarded by a dark flush creeping up his neck. "You," Jones looked from me to Kevin and back again, "are either very brave or very stupid." "Both," Emma said dryly. "Gee, thanks." I was still lisping a little, but was determined to ignore it. I rummaged around in the duffel for sweat socks and running shoes, then plopped down on the edge of the slab to pull them on, leaving the others to argue among themselves, which they proceeded to do. With vigor. I ignored it for the most part. I had other things on my mind, like sunlight, spontaneous combustion, the fact that I would have a really, really hard time explaining an aversion to holy objects to my gran. The 3 of them were still arguing when I finished with the shoes and socks. I think that's why they didn't hear the commotion in the hallway. Emma might have missed it either way, but werewolves have excellent hearing, and from the jolt I got when I touched him, Jones wasn't your average human either. But I heard, and even more weird, scented it. 3 men in hard-soled dress shoes were coming down the hall. They walked with the kind of confidence that comes with the weight of authority. I smelled gun oil and the tiniest hint of powder, as if the weapon hadn't been cleaned quite as well as it should have been after its last use. They slowed to a stop outside the heavy steel of the main door. I heard the metal shift as someone began pulling it open, and a voice I recognized as belonging to Dr. Reynolds from the University Health Clinic, babbling nervously. I watched, alert, as their figures were silhouetted against the sunlight of the glass-walled outer hallway. The sunlight seemed too bright, like staring into a spotlight on stage. It made my skin itch even from a distance, and I felt my muscles cringe. That annoyed me. From the corner of my eye, I saw the argument between Emma and Kevin cease. Jones had simply disappeared, like magic, except that I know magic, and nobody I'd ever known or heard of was capable of that particular trick. The man who held the door was familiar to me, and probably to every student who graced the halls of USC Bayview. University President Donald Lackley had movie star good looks, a permanent tan, and shoes that had once roamed free in the Florida swamplands. His designer suit was impeccable, perfectly tailored, and probably worth as much as the car I drive. He is a presence, and as such never misses a photo op or a chance to catch donations for the campus. That said, he is still one hell of an able administrator. No detail is small enough to escape the notice of those sharp, dark eyes. Most people would have been surprised that he'd choose to lead the charge down here himself. I wasn't. If he was here, he could control the situation. Like most administrators, Lackley was all about control. If he hadn't already been married, I'd have said he was the perfect match for Emma Landingham. "Good morning, Emma. Kevin." Lackley's voice was much cooler than usual when he spoke to them. He knew my name but didn't greet me. I wasn't surprised. He looked at Emma. "Dr. Reynolds explained to me that there's been an incident involving Miss Graves." Kevin glared at the good doctor, who flinched a little under the heat of his gaze. "I did say you had the situation in hand," the doctor mumbled. Lackley spared the doctor an eloquent look. The poor man shifted nervously from foot to foot. He was a small, mousy little man with a receding hairline and a slight paunch that didn't show when he was wearing a lab coat. He seemed to be a fairly good doctor, but a poor politician. Today he just couldn't catch a break. No matter what he did, he'd be pissing somebody off. You did, but I'd be remiss if I didn't personally check to make sure that a potentially deadly monster hadn't been brought onto the campus. I smiled and hoped the fangs didn't show. I'm fine, President Lackley, but thank you for your concern. Unlike Kevin and the doc, I don't work for the university, and am thus exempt from kissing administrative booty. So long as I paid my tuition on time, there wasn't much they could do to me. I could be as sarcastic as I wanted, provided I didn't appear to be a threat. I saw the muscles in Lackley's jaw tighten, but he didn't say a word in response, so I turned my attention from him to the third man in their happy little group. C.J. Rocky Rockford was the head of the campus security forces. We'd had occasion to run into each other, and while he knew he probably shouldn't like me, he did. We even went to the shooting range and worked out in the gym and weight room together occasionally. Hey, Rock. Rocky's a big guy, former boxer and tough as they come. His skin is deep brown with copper highlights. He keeps his hair cut short enough that you can see the scalp beneath it. He isn't a handsome man, but he is impressive, which allows him to, in the immortal words of Patrick Swayze, be nice until it is time not to be nice. Rocky was always armed, but today he was carrying a plain black nylon satchel. I was betting I knew what was inside. Holy items, a stake, a mallet, and a saw, your typical vampire kit. Graves, what happened? His voice didn't sound particularly friendly this morning, and he was rubbing his finger along a ridge of scar tissue at the bridge of his nose. He does that when he's nervous. I couldn't say as I blamed him. Never makes things easy when the ultimate boss takes a personal interest. Plus, I'd like to think Rocky hadn't been looking forward to staking and beheading a workout partner. I don't really remember much about it. I should be dead from what I've gathered. But I'm not, and despite the fangs, I remember who I am. I was out on the slab until just a few minutes ago. He blinked a couple of times in surprise, but finally managed to ask, Hit? Here on campus? Kevin answered that one. No. Then why is she here? Lackley's gaze locked with Kevin's, and neither of them seemed inclined to back down. It was my fault. Emma spoke quietly. I'm a level 4 clairvoyant. I knew Celia was in serious danger. I called my father and brother and told them what I saw. My brother went to get her. Dad's in Chicago on business, so he called Dr. Reynolds. Nobody wanted to risk what happened in that emergency room in Denver, so he brought her here and brought the equipment in. The restraints on this table are graded to hold an uncontrolled ghoul if need be. We figured they'd be strong enough to handle whatever she became. I was surprised. Emma's gift is sporadic at best, and usually only works in connection with people she cares about. I wouldn't have put myself on that list. She'd saved my life. Of course, she'd turned around and risked it a couple hours later, but still. I turned to look her in the eye. Thank you. She blinked, obviously startled. You're welcome. So, you admit to bringing a potentially dangerous monster onto campus and not reporting it. Emma flushed at the implied criticism. I did report it. To the local police, over the phone, while Dr. Reynolds was giving Celia the blood transfusion. She met Lackley's gaze head-on, her chin thrust up in defiance. And if you check the voicemail for your office, you'll find an urgent message from me. Lackley didn't rise to the bait. What did the police say? They said they'd look into it. She turned to me then. When I called back, they said there were no dead bodies at that address, or even in the area, monster, human, or otherwise. I blinked. That made no sense. None. I blinked a few more times, trying to process what she'd just said, without much success. The officer I spoke to seemed to imply that I was being hysterical. He was polite. Extremely polite. But I got the impression he considered me a nutcase. Whatever he'd implied, they were most likely working on it. She probably hadn't made a particularly good impression. She could be a raging bitch in heels, and they wouldn't take to it. But somebody was probably doing the legwork. They take talk of monsters and dead bodies